The Vanderbilt estate looked like something out of a Christmas fantasy. 20-foot tree in the grand foyer, dripping with crystal ornaments and gold ribbon. Chandeliers reflecting off polished marble. White-gloved staff circulating with champagne. The kind of wealth that didn't whisper, it sang opera. Layla Kingston stood at the entrance, snow dusting the shoulders of her crimson gown, and felt the familiar knot of anxiety tighten in her chest. 3 years. 3 years since she'd walked through these doors as Mason Vanderbilt's wife. 3 years since she'd been destroyed, humiliated, and cast aside like yesterday's news. In her arms, Nova stirred. 2 years old, cream velvet dress, dark curls framing a face that was a perfect blend of her parents. The daughter Mason didn't know existed. "You sure about this, Miss Kingston?" Her driver, Marcus, stood by the car, concern etched on his face. He'd been with her since Atlanta, knew the whole story. Layla adjusted Nova on her hip. The baby's small hand clutched her mother's diamond necklace, the one Layla had bought herself with her first major business deal. "I'm sure." She wasn't, but she was done being afraid. Through the massive windows she could see them, the Vanderbilt family gathering for their annual Christmas dinner. 40 guests, old money, new money, the kind of people who decided what mattered in New York society. And Mason. Even from here, she could see him holding court near the fireplace, still devastatingly handsome at 38, tall, broad-shouldered, that smile that could charm and destroy in equal measure. His arm was draped around someone new, a blonde, 20-something, interchangeable with the dozen others who'd come before. He was laughing, confident, king of his castle. He had no idea his world was about to shift on its axis. Layla had almost declined the invitation. When Mason's mother, sweet, oblivious Catherine Vanderbilt, had reached out with that handwritten note, Layla's first instinct had been to burn it. But then she'd looked at Nova, at this perfect little person who existed because Layla had survived the worst thing that ever happened to her. This child who deserved to know where she came from, who her father was, even if that father was a monster. More than that, though, Layla had looked at herself, at what she'd built from nothing, at the woman she'd become when she stopped trying to be small enough for Mason's ego. Nova Beauty had just been valued at $120 million. She had offices in 3 cities. Her products were in Sephora, Nordstrom, Bloomingdale's. She'd been featured in Forbes, Essence, Vogue Business. She'd done all of that while raising a baby alone, while building herself back from the fragments Mason had left behind. She wasn't the broken scholarship girl from Brooklyn anymore. She was a goddamn empire. And tonight, she was going to walk back into that house, not for revenge, not for drama, but because she refused to hide anymore. Mason had tried to erase her, had told their entire social circle she was unstable, vindictive, a nobody who'd gotten lucky marrying up. Tonight, he'd learn exactly who Layla Kingston had become. Nova made a small sound, reaching for the glittering lights visible through the windows. "Pretty," the toddler whispered. "Yes, baby, very pretty." Layla kissed her daughter's forehead. "Ready to meet some people?" Nova nodded, all innocence and trust. Layla took a breath, straightened her spine, let the cold December air fill her lungs. Then she walked toward the door. The butler, Richard, still here after all these years, opened it before she could knock. His face registered shock, then something like relief. "Miss Kingston," he said quietly, "welcome back." "Thank you, Richard." She stepped inside. The warmth hit her first, then the noise, laughter, conversation, the gentle clink of crystal. Then silence. One by one, heads turned. Conversations died mid-sentence. Champagne glasses paused halfway to lips. Because standing in the entrance, illuminated by chandelier light, was the woman they'd all written off 3 years ago. Only she wasn't broken anymore. She was radiant, and in her arms was a child who looked exactly like Mason Vanderbilt. Across the room, Mason froze. His hand tightened on his girlfriend's waist. His smile faltered. Their eyes met. Layla smiled, and everything changed. If you love stories about women who refuse to stay broken, about secret babies and public reckonings, about watching arrogant people finally face the truth they've been running from, you're in exactly the right place. Hit that subscribe button because stories this detailed take days to craft. Trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. To understand tonight, you need to understand what Mason Vanderbilt took from Layla Kingston 3 years ago. Not just her marriage, not just her dignity, her entire sense of self. Layla had been 25 when they met, final year at Columbia, double major in business and psychology, working 3 jobs to afford the apartment she shared with 2 roommates in Washington Heights. She'd earned a scholarship that covered tuition, but not life. So she worked, morning barista shift, afternoon intern at Vanderbilt Properties, evening tutoring rich kids whose parents paid $200 an hour. She was exhausted, brilliant, hungry for a future that looked nothing like her childhood in a cramped Brooklyn apartment where her mother cleaned houses to pay rent. Mason had noticed her during a corporate presentation. She'd been the intern tasked with preparing the market analysis slides. He'd asked her a question about Brooklyn neighborhood development, testing her, probably expecting the fumbling answer of someone out of her depth. Instead, Layla had given him a 10-minute breakdown of demographic shifts, investment patterns, and gentrification economics that had made 3 senior executives take notes. After the meeting, he'd found her. "You're wasted as an intern. Have dinner with me. I want to talk about your future." She should have said no, should have recognized the predatory gleam in his eyes. Instead, she'd said yes, because Mason Vanderbilt was handsome, powerful, interested, because he made her feel seen in a way no one ever had. The courtship was a whirlwind. Private jets to Miami for the weekend. Diamonds appearing on her desk with notes that said, "Just because." Introductions to his family, his world, his impossible life. "You're different," he told her on their 3rd date, champagne in hand, overlooking Central Park from his penthouse. "Everyone else in my world was born into it. You earned your way here. That's sexy as hell." She'd fallen, hard, fast, completely. The wedding was a spectacle. Vera Wang dress, Plaza Hotel, coverage in every society magazine. Her mother had cried through the ceremony. Happy tears, Layla thought then. Now she wondered if they'd been something else. Warning, maybe. Grief for the daughter who was about to learn a brutal lesson. The first year was good, great even. Mason was attentive, generous, proud to show her off at galas and charity events. "My brilliant wife," he'd introduce her, pulled herself up from nothing. The microaggressions started small. Comments about her hair when she wore it natural instead of straightened. Suggestions that she'd be more comfortable in designer clothes chosen by his stylist rather than her own taste. Corrections to her grammar at dinner parties, delivered with a smile that didn't hide the condescension. "I'm helping you fit in, baby," he'd say when she pushed back. "You're new to this world. I'm just making sure you succeed." She'd believed that was love, that his criticism was investment in their shared future. Then came the control. He wanted her to quit the job she'd taken at a marketing firm. "We don't need the money, and I need you available for company events." He wanted access to her phone, her email, her friends. Couples shouldn't have secrets. The affair started in year 2. She'd found the first one by accident. Text messages from someone named Amber M. that were decidedly not professional. When she'd confronted him, Mason had turned it into her problem. "You're being paranoid and insecure. This is why I can't share everything with you. You twist innocent friendships into drama." Gaslighting. She'd learned that word later. In the moment, she just felt crazy. More affairs, more lies, more of Layla shrinking herself, trying to be enough, wondering what she was doing wrong. The breaking point came on their 2nd anniversary. She'd planned a surprise, canceled her meetings, drove to their Hamptons house, prepared his favorite meal, wore the lingerie he'd bought her. found him in their bed with a 22-year-old aspiring actress named Sienna. The girl had scrambled for her clothes, mortified. Mason had barely blinked. "Well," he'd said, sitting up against the headboard like they were discussing breakfast plans, "I guess we're done pretending." No apology, no shame, just cold acknowledgement that he'd never really valued her at all. "I want a divorce." He'd laughed, actually laughed. "Good luck with that, sweetheart. You signed a prenup that gives you basically nothing. And trust me, if you try to make this ugly, I will bury you. I made you. I can unmake you just as easily." He'd meant every word, and he'd done exactly that. Back in the present, the silence in the Vanderbilt Grand Foyer was deafening. Catherine Vanderbilt recovered first. Mason's mother swept across the marble floor, arms outstretched, face lighting with genuine joy. "Layla! Oh, my dear, you came! I'm so glad!" She stopped mid-sentence, gaze dropping to the child in Layla's arms. "Is this?" Catherine's voice faltered. "This is Nova," Layla said calmly. "My daughter. She's beautiful." Catherine reached out tentatively, and Nova, never shy, grabbed her finger, smiling. "How old?" 2.5. The math was instant, visible. Catherine's eyes widened, darting to her son across the room, then back to Nova, then to Layla. "Does Mason?" "No." One word, heavy with 3 years of secrets. Catherine looked like she wanted to say more, but the moment was interrupted by Mason himself, striding across the floor with his girlfriend trailing behind. He'd composed himself, put the mask back on, but Layla could see it, the tension in his jaw, the calculation in his eyes as he took in Nova's face and did his own math. "Layla," his voice was smooth, pleasant, dangerous. "What a surprise. Mother didn't mention you'd be joining us." "Last-minute decision," Layla said, matching his tone. "I hope that's not a problem." "Of course not. The more the merrier." His gaze dropped to Nova deliberately. "And who's this?" "My daughter, Nova." "Charming." The word was ice. "I didn't know you had children." "There's a lot you don't know about me anymore, Mason." The girlfriend, Madison, Mackenzie, Layla hadn't bothered learning, shifted uncomfortably. She was young, pretty in that generic influencer way, probably had no idea what she'd stepped into. "Well," Mason said, smile never wavering, "let's get you both some refreshments. We're about to sit for dinner." He turned away, dismissing her like he'd dismissed everything about their marriage. But Layla saw it, the tremor in his hand as he reached for his champagne, the way his eyes kept flickering back to Nova. He knew, maybe not with certainty, but enough to be afraid. Catherine guided Layla into the dining room, a space that could seat 50, tonight set for 40. Crystal, china, silver that probably cost more than most people's cars. Layla had eaten at this table dozens of times as Mason's wife, had sat through interminable dinners where old money discussed old money problems, where she'd been the exotic addition everyone pretended to accept while never quite including her. Tonight felt different because she wasn't Mason's wife anymore. She was Layla Kingston, CEO, a name that actually meant something now. People approached her, tentative at first, then with genuine interest. "Layla Kingston? The Nova Beauty Layla Kingston? I love your products. The vitamin C serum is incredible. Forbes' piece last month was excellent. That growth trajectory is remarkable." They knew who she was, not as Mason's discarded ex-wife, as herself. Mason watched from across the room, jaw tight, as Layla was swarmed with attention he couldn't control. Nova helped. The toddler was charming in that unself-conscious way children are, playing with Layla's necklace, waving at strangers, drawing coos and compliments. "She's gorgeous. Looks just like..." Someone stopped mid-sentence, eyes darting to Mason, then away. Everyone was doing the math, seeing the resemblance, not saying anything yet, but they would. Once they had a moment to talk among themselves, to whisper, to confirm what they all suspected. The dinner bell rang. Catherine began directing people to their seats with the efficiency of someone who'd hosted 1,000 formal dinners. She placed Layla directly across from Mason, not at the far end, not safely distant, right there, where they'd have to look at each other through 7 courses. Catherine was many things, but she wasn't stupid. She knew exactly what she just orchestrated. Layla sat, settling Nova on her lap. The toddler was tired, would probably fall asleep against her mother's chest before dessert. Mason sat across from her, girlfriend beside him, and raised his champagne glass. "To family," he said, voice carrying across the table, "and the ghosts of Christmas past." His eyes were locked on Layla's. She smiled back, calm, unshaken. "To truth," she said quietly, "may it finally come to light." And the dinner began. If you were Layla, would you have told Mason about the pregnancy 3 years ago, or kept it secret like she did? What would you have done? While appetizers were served, Layla's mind drifted back to the aftermath, to the months after she'd signed those divorce papers and discovered she was pregnant. Mason's lawyers had eviscerated her. The prenup she'd signed at 26, naive, in love, trusting, gave her almost nothing. She left the marriage with $200,000, enough to survive for a year if she was careful, not enough to matter in the world she'd been living in. But worse than the financial devastation was the social destruction. Mason had weaponized his connections. Suddenly, job opportunities dried up. The marketing position she'd been interviewing for mysteriously went to someone else. Networking contacts stopped returning calls. Friends from their marriage, couples they'd vacationed with, people she'd considered close, vanished. And the rumors, God, the rumors. She was unstable, a gold digger who trapped him, had affairs with multiple men, was vindictive and delusional. Every terrible thing Mason had actually done, he'd projected onto her through carefully planted gossip. Manhattan became hostile territory. Every restaurant, every event, every corner held memories in judgment. So when the pregnancy test came back positive, Layla made a decision. She would disappear. Not dramatically, not with announcements or explanations, just fade from New York society and rebuild somewhere else. Atlanta became home, far enough away that she wouldn't randomly run into Mason's world, big enough that she could build something new, black enough that she didn't feel like a token anymore. She'd rented a small apartment in Midtown, took freelance marketing consulting jobs that let her work from home, and in every spare moment, early mornings before the nausea hit, late nights when pregnancy insomnia kept her awake, she'd worked in the business plan. Nova Beauty. Named before Nova was even born, before Layla knew she was having a daughter. Named for new beginnings, for something that would be entirely hers. The concept was simple. Luxury skincare for Black women, using her grandmother's recipes as inspiration. Natural ingredients, real results, packaging that looked as expensive as it was. She'd launched with $50,000, scraped together from the divorce settlement, a small business loan, and sheer desperation. Made the first batch of products in her apartment kitchen, sold them through Instagram and word of mouth. Nova was born on a Tuesday in March. 8 pounds, healthy lungs, those unmistakable Vanderbilt eyes. Layla had held her daughter in the hospital room. No husband, no family. Her mother had died 2 years earlier. Just her and this perfect, terrifying new person, and made a promise. You will never feel small. You will never doubt your worth. And you will always, always know that your mother chose you, chose us. She'd left Mason's name off the birth certificate, listed father as unknown. It wasn't spite, it was protection. Because if Mason knew about Nova, he'd try to control this too. Would use his daughter as another piece on the board, another way to manipulate and diminish Layla. No, Nova deserved better, deserved a mother who was whole, strong, untouchable. So Layla had built that mother, built that life. Nova Beauty exploded in year 2. A celebrity posted about the vitamin C serum. Sales went from hundreds to thousands to hundreds of thousands. Investors started calling. Sephora wanted to talk partnership. By Nova's second birthday, Layla had what Mason always said she'd never have without him. Real power, real success, real worth. And now, sitting across from him at this Christmas dinner, watching him try to maintain control while his world shifted beneath him, Layla felt something she hadn't felt in 3 years. Peace. Not revenge, not vindication, just the quiet certainty that she'd survived him, that she'd built something beautiful from the ashes of what he destroyed, and that tonight, finally, he'd understand exactly what he'd lost. The tension at dinner was palpable. Conversations flowed around Mason and Layla, but there was a gravitational pull between them that everyone could feel. Nova had fallen asleep against Layla's chest, tiny fingers still clutching her mother's dress. Mason's girlfriend, Mackenzie, Layla had finally learned, was trying to navigate the strange dynamic. She kept touching Mason's arm, laughing a bit too loud at his comments, marking territory. So Layla, one of Mason's cousins, Derek, leaned forward from down the table. "We've been hearing about Nova Beauty. Pretty impressive growth." "Thank you, it's been a journey. From divorce settlement to 8-figure company in 3 years? That's not a journey, that's a rocket launch." Derek raised his glass. "What's your secret?" Mason's jaw tightened. "Necessity," Layla said simply, "and refusing to believe that my worth was tied to anyone else's opinion of me." The comment hung in the air. People shifted uncomfortably. Everyone at this table knew the divorce story, or the version Mason had told. "Must have been hard," Catherine said gently, "building a business with a newborn." "Nova was my motivation. Everything I built for her." "Single motherhood is so brave," Mackenzie chimed in, clearly trying to relate. "My sister is a single mom, and it's like, so hard, you know?" "I imagine it is," Layla said neutrally. "How old did you say Nova was?" This from Mason's father, Richard Vanderbilt, who'd been silent until now. He was studying the sleeping child with an intensity that made Layla's heart race. 2.5. "And the father?" Silence crashed over the table. Richard wasn't asking out of politeness. He was calculating, doing the same math everyone else had done, but saying it out loud. "Not in the picture," Layla said calmly. "By choice?" "His choice initially, my choice ultimately." Richard took a sip of wine, eyes never leaving Nova's face. "She's a beautiful child, looks familiar somehow." Mason's hand was white-knuckled around his fork. "Children often do," Layla said. "Universal features, I suppose." "I don't think that's it," Richard smiled, shark-like, calculating. He'd built the Vanderbilt empire before Mason inherited it. He knew exactly what game was being played. "I think she looks like family." "Father," Mason's voice was tight. "What? I'm just saying the child has strong features, the eyes especially." Richard turned to his son. "Don't you think she looks familiar, Mason?" The table was silent, 40 people holding their breath. Mason looked at Nova, really looked, at the sleeping toddler who had his mother's nose, his jawline, those distinctive Vanderbilt eyes that appeared in every family portrait going back 4 generations. "I don't see it," he said flatly. "Liar. Everyone could see it. When did you say you had her?" Mason's voice was casual, but Layla heard the edge. "I didn't say. Humor me. March, 2.5 years ago. Must have been right after..." He stopped himself. "Right after our divorce was finalized?" "Yes. Interesting timing, isn't it?" Mackenzie looked between them, confusion morphing into realization. "Wait, are you saying..." "I'm not saying anything," Layla said calmly. "People are drawing their own conclusions." "This is ridiculous." Mason threw his napkin on the table. "If there was something I needed to know, you would have told me 3 years ago. Unless you're the kind of person who'd weaponize a child for, what? Revenge? Attention? The mask was cracking. His voice was rising. The smooth, controlled Mason Vanderbilt was splintering under pressure. Or, Layla said quietly, dangerously, I'm the kind of person who protected my daughter from a man who destroyed everything he touched, including me. Protected her? Or hid her because you knew I'd demand a paternity test? That I'd expose whatever con you're running here? Con? Layla's voice was still calm, but fire burned beneath. I built a successful company while raising a child alone. I don't need anything from you, Mason. I never did. You just convinced me I did. Then why are you here? If you're so independent, so successful, why show up to my family's Christmas dinner with a child who, let's be honest, you're clearly implying is mine? Because your mother invited me, and because I'm done hiding. Nova stirred, disturbed by the rising voices, made a small, distressed sound. Instantly, Layla's entire demeanor shifted. She stood, cradling her daughter, rocking gently. Shh, baby. It's okay. Mama's here. Nova settled back into sleep. The room watched this small, intimate moment. Watched Layla be soft and fierce simultaneously. Watched her prioritize her child over the drama. Watched her be everything Mason had never been capable of being. Actually, genuinely loving. Catherine stood. Perhaps we should take a break before dessert. Give everyone a chance to process. People scattered gratefully, heading toward the library, the sitting room, anywhere but the tension of that dining table. Mason grabbed Layla's arm as she tried to pass. Not hard, but firm. We need to talk, privately. She looked at his hand on her arm, then at his face. Take your hand off me. He did, immediately, like he'd been burned. 5 minutes, the study, please. Layla looked at Catherine, who nodded. I'll hold Nova, take all the time you need. Surprisingly, Nova went to Catherine easily. The toddler sensed her grandmother, even if she didn't know the connection. Layla followed Mason to the study and closed the door behind them. The study was exactly as Layla remembered. Dark wood, leather chairs, bookshelves filled with first editions Mason had never read. His father's space, really. Mason had always felt like an imposter here. He turned on her the moment the door closed. Is she mine? No preamble, no politeness. What do you think? I think you showed up here with a child who looks like my family for a reason. I think you're playing a game. Everything is a game to you, isn't it? Layla's calm was fracturing now that they were alone. Everything is strategy and manipulation and control. Answer the question, Layla. Is Nova my daughter? Biologically? Yes. The word hung between them. Confirmation of what everyone had suspected. Mason stumbled backward slightly, gripping the desk. You've known for 3 years. You kept my child from me for 3 years. I kept my child from you. There's a difference. The hell there is? I have rights. You have nothing. Layla's voice was sharp as broken glass. You have no name on the birth certificate, no legal claim, no relationship. You were busy destroying my reputation while I was pregnant with your baby. You want to talk about rights? I didn't know. And whose fault is that, Mason? I found out 2 weeks after the divorce. 2 weeks after you called me unstable and vindictive to everyone we knew. 2 weeks after your lawyers made sure I walked away with nothing. You want me to believe that if I'd told you then, you'd have been supportive? Loving? You'd have suddenly become the man you never were during our marriage? He had no answer for that. You would have demanded a paternity test, Layla continued, voice shaking now. Would have accused me of trying to trap you. Would have used my pregnancy as another way to control and humiliate me. So yes, I kept her from you. Because she deserved better than growing up as another pawn in your games. She's my daughter. She's my daughter. I carried her, birthed her, raised her, sang her to sleep, stayed up through every fever, built a business so I could give her everything. Where were you? Oh, right. with a rotating cast of 20-year-olds who stroked your ego. Mason's face was red. You had no right to make that decision alone. You made the decision when you cheated, when you gaslit me, when you destroyed my reputation and threw me away. You made the decision, Mason. I just lived with the consequences. Silence. Then, quieter. I want a paternity test. Of course you do. Layla's laugh was bitter. Because even now you can't just trust, can't just accept, have to control, verify, dominate. That's not, it's standard practice. Fine, we'll do a paternity test. And when it comes back confirming what you already know, what then? You want custody? Visitation? Want to play daddy for a child you've never met? She's a Vanderbilt. She's a Kingston. That's the only name she knows. That's not fair to her. She deserves to know her father, her family, her heritage. Her heritage? Layla stepped closer. You want to teach her what, exactly? How to treat people as disposable? How to lie and cheat and manipulate? How to value money over everything? That's not who I am. That's exactly who you are. She was yelling now, 3 years of anger finally erupting. You destroyed me, Mason. Took a girl who was brilliant and confident and full of dreams, and you systematically broke her down until she didn't recognize herself. And you did it while telling me you loved me, while making me feel crazy for noticing, while making me think I was the problem. Tears were streaming down her face now. She hadn't planned this, hadn't wanted to give him the satisfaction of seeing her broken. But something about being in this house, in this room, facing him again, it all came flooding back. The pain, the gaslighting, the slow destruction of her self-worth. I was pregnant and alone in a city that hated me because you poisoned everyone against me. I was terrified and broke and convinced I'd failed at everything. And you want to know the worst part? He said nothing. I still loved you. Even after everything, part of me still wanted you to come back, to apologize, to prove everyone wrong and be the man I thought I'd married. She wiped her face. But you never did. You just moved on, found someone new, pretended I'd never existed. Layla, I survived you, built something beautiful from the ruins you left. And Nova? She's the best thing that ever happened to me. The one good thing that came from the worst period of my life. I want to be part of her life. Why? The question stopped him. Why, Mason? Is it because you genuinely want to know your daughter? Or because your pride can't handle that I succeeded without you? That I built an empire and raised a child and didn't need you at all? He had no answer. Or maybe the answer was too ugly to say out loud. I'll agree to a paternity test, Layla said finally, and we'll discuss what comes next based on what's best for Nova. Not what's best for your ego. Not what makes you look good. What's best for a 2-year-old child who doesn't know you and doesn't need the chaos you bring. She moved toward the door. Layla, his voice was soft now, almost broken. I'm sorry, for everything, for all of it. She turned back, looked at him, really looked, saw past the handsome face and expensive suit to the hollow man underneath. I know you are, but sorry doesn't fix 3 years. Sorry doesn't undo the damage. Sorry is just a word that makes you feel better about the things you did. She opened the door. Merry Christmas, Mason, and walked out. Do you think Layla was right to keep Nova a secret for 3 years? Or should she have told Mason about the pregnancy despite everything? What would you have done? When Layla returned to the party, Nova was awake in Catherine's arms, eating a cookie and charming everyone in the vicinity. Catherine's face was kind when she saw Layla, knowing. Everything all right? We talked, that's all. He knows? He knows. Catherine looked down at Nova, then back at Layla. I wish you'd told me. 3 years, Layla. I've missed 3 years with my granddaughter. The pain in her voice was real, gutting. I know. I'm sorry. I was protecting her from my son. I understand. Catherine's voice was soft. I'm not blind to Mason's flaws. I've watched him become someone I don't always recognize. Someone his father and I didn't raise him to be. Catherine, but this child? She kissed Nova's forehead. She's innocent. She deserves to know her family. The good parts, at least. Layla felt emotion clogging her throat. I know. That's why I came tonight. Not to hurt anyone, just to stop hiding. You've built something remarkable, Catherine said. Your business, your independence. Most people would have crumbled. You thrived. I had motivation. Layla touched Nova's hand. Richard Vanderbilt approached them, champagne in hand, expression unreadable. Ms. Kingston, might I have a word? Layla tensed. Mason's father was legendary, brilliant, ruthless, the real power behind the Vanderbilt name. Mason was CEO in title, but everyone knew Richard still pulled strings. They stepped into the hallway, away from the party noise. I won't insult your intelligence with games, Richard said. That's my granddaughter, isn't it? Yes. And you kept her from us intentionally. I kept her from Mason. I didn't know you'd care. Care? Richard's laugh was short. Ms. Kingston, you've given the Vanderbilt family its first heir in this generation. My other children have proven spectacularly uninterested in reproducing. Mason's siblings are either child-free by choice or struggling with fertility. That little girl in there is my legacy. She's not a legacy, she's a person. She's both. And you've raised her without Vanderbilt resources, Vanderbilt education, Vanderbilt connections. She's 2. She doesn't need Yale connections yet. No, but she will. And you'll need resources to protect her from what's coming. Layla's stomach dropped. What's coming? Mason will fight for custody, or at least visitation. His pride won't allow anything less now that it's public knowledge. I won't let him. You may not have a choice. He has resources, lawyers, and a legitimate claim now that paternity can be established. Richard sipped his champagne. Unless you have better resources. I don't understand. You've built an impressive company. $120 million valuation is nothing to dismiss, but Mason's worth 10 times that. His legal team will drown you in motions, depositions, costs. So what are you suggesting? I'm suggesting that you and I might have aligned interests. I want access to my granddaughter. You want Mason's influence limited. We can achieve both goals. How? Let me fund your legal defense. The best family lawyers money can buy. We establish a custody arrangement that gives you primary custody, Mason's supervised visitation, and me grandparent rights. Everyone gets something. Nova gets stability. Why would you go against your own son? Richard's face hardened. Because I've watched him waste his potential for years, coast on family name while making poor decisions. I gave him the CEO title hoping responsibility would mature him. Instead, he's treated it like a playground. The affairs, the divorces, the public scandals. It reflects poorly on the family. So this is about reputation? This is about legacy. Your daughter carries Vanderbilt blood. That means something. She deserves better than being a pawn in Mason's ego games. Layla studied him, saw the calculation, but also saw something else, genuine interest in Nova, desired to know his granddaughter. I need time to think. Of course, but think quickly. Mason will move fast once his pride recovers. Richard handed her a card. My private number. Call me when you're ready to discuss details. He walked away, leaving Layla in the hallway, head spinning. She'd come here to reclaim her dignity, to show Mason she'd survived him. Instead, she'd opened a door that couldn't be closed, brought Nova into the Vanderbilt orbit, whether she'd intended to or not. And now everyone wanted a piece of her daughter. Mason for his pride, Richard for his legacy, Catherine for her heart. The only person who wanted Nova for Nova was Layla, and she'd fight like hell to keep it that way. The party ended with strained politeness. People thanked Catherine, wished Layla awkward well wishes, and left buzzing with gossip that would dominate New York society for weeks. Mason had disappeared after their study conversation. Mackenzie had left 20 minutes later, alone, face streaked with tears. The relationship probably wouldn't survive the night. Tough to compete with a secret baby in 3 years of history. As Layla prepared to leave, Catherine pulled her aside one more time. "I meant what I said about missing out, but I understand why." She touched Layla's arm. "You're welcome here, anytime, both of you, regardless of what happens with Mason." "Thank you. And Layla, what you've built, your business, your strength, your life, that's remarkable. Don't let anyone make you feel it isn't, including my son." In the car, Nova babbled about cookies and pretty lights, oblivious to the earthquake she'd caused. Marcus, her driver, met her eyes in the rearview mirror. "How'd it go?" "Honestly, I have no idea." Her phone started buzzing before they even left the driveway. Text from a number she didn't recognize. "This is Derek Vanderbilt. Need to talk to you about protecting yourself legally. Mason plays dirty. Call me." Another from Catherine. "Please send me photos of Nova. I want to get to know her properly. Grandmother's rights." One from Richard. "Lawyers on standby. Say the word." And then finally one from Mason. "We need to establish paternity officially. My lawyers will contact you tomorrow. This isn't over." Layla stared at that last message, felt the familiar anxiety creeping back, the fear that she'd miscalculated, that coming here had been a mistake. But then Nova grabbed her face with both small hands. "Mama happy?" Layla looked at her daughter, at this perfect little person who existed despite everything, who was loved fiercely and completely. "Yes, baby, Mama's happy." "Good." Nova snuggled into her mother's chest. "Cookies were good." Layla laughed, really laughed, for the first time all night. She'd come to the Christmas dinner expecting confrontation, expected to prove she'd survived, expected to show Mason she didn't need him. What she hadn't expected was that everyone else would have their own agendas, their own wants and needs regarding Nova. The car pulled up to her hotel. She'd refused to stay at any Vanderbilt property, had booked a suite at the plaza under her company's name. Once Nova was asleep in the bedroom, Layla poured herself wine and stared at her phone. Dozens of messages now. Some from old friends who'd ghosted her 3 years ago, suddenly interested in reconnecting. Others from business contacts who'd ignored her for years, now wanting to discuss opportunities. Vultures, all of them. She opened her laptop and did something she'd been avoiding. Searched Mason's name. Found articles about his company, his lifestyle, his latest girlfriend, ex-girlfriend as of tonight. Then found something else. A recent interview in Forbes about the Vanderbilt real estate empire. "I'm building something that will last generations," Mason was quoted. "Family is everything. Legacy is everything." He'd said that a month ago. Now he actually had an heir, a daughter, the legacy he'd been posturing about, and he'd do anything to control that narrative. Layla closed her laptop and looked at the bedroom door where Nova slept. She'd thought tonight was an ending, a final confrontation, closure. Instead, it was a beginning, a custody battle, legal warfare, the full force of Vanderbilt money and power aimed at taking her daughter. But Layla wasn't the broken girl from 3 years ago. She was a CEO, a mother, a woman who'd built an empire from nothing. And she'd be damned if she'd let Mason Vanderbilt take anything else from her. She picked up her phone and texted Richard Vanderbilt. "Let's talk tomorrow, about lawyers." His response came instantly. "Smart decision. We'll protect her together." Layla set her phone down and took a deep breath. This wasn't over. It was just beginning. But this time, she was ready. The custody agreement was finalized on a Tuesday in June. Primary custody to Layla. Supervised visitation for Mason, 4 hours twice monthly at a neutral location. Grandparent rights for Catherine and Richard, 1 visit per month at their home. Nova's last name remained Kingston, for now. Mason had fought it. God, he'd fought it. 3 depositions, 12 mediation sessions, a legal battle that cost him $400,000, and Layla nothing. Richard had made good on his promise, funding the best family attorneys in New York. The judge had been unimpressed with Mason's arguments. Mr. Vanderbilt, you've presented no evidence that Ms. Kingston is unfit. You've presented substantial evidence that you were unaware of the child's existence because Ms. Kingston had legitimate concerns about your character and stability. The court sees no reason to disrupt a child's established, loving home because the father is belatedly interested in parenting. Mason's face had gone red. This is discrimination. This is common sense. Paternity has been established. You have visitation rights. Be grateful for that. The gavel had come down. Final. Mason had stormed out, lawyers scrambling to keep up. Layla had sat in the courtroom, Richard beside her, and felt something she hadn't felt in years. Safe. The business had exploded in the interim. The publicity from the Christmas dinner had been massive. Secret billionaire baby headlines dominated for weeks. Layla had handled it with grace, giving one carefully crafted interview to Vanity Fair about building a life of integrity and protecting my daughter from toxic patterns. Sales had tripled. Nova Beauty expanded into Ulta. International markets started calling. Forbes updated her net worth estimate to $200 million. She'd moved from Atlanta to a brownstone in Brooklyn. Close enough to co-parent with the Vanderbilts, far enough to maintain distance. Her own space, her own rules. Nova was thriving, enrolled in a progressive preschool, had a nanny named Grace who was more like family, was learning to navigate her expanded family, grandmother Catherine who spoiled her, grandfather Richard who taught her chess, yes at 3, and the father who appeared twice a month and tried too hard. Mason's visits were complicated. The first few had been disasters. Nova didn't know him, clung to Layla, cried when Mason tried to hold her. He'd been hurt, angry. She's my daughter and she's acting like I'm a stranger. You are a stranger, Layla had said quietly. You have to earn her trust, just like everyone else. Slowly, it got better. Mason learned to follow Nova's lead instead of forcing interaction. Brought books she liked, played the games she enjoyed, stopped trying to buy her affection with expensive toys. By month 5, Nova smiled when she saw him, said "Dada" experimentally, let him push her on the swings at the park. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. Catherine had become Nova's most devoted grandparent. Weekly visits where they baked cookies, read stories, played dress-up. She'd created a bedroom at the estate specifically for Nova, painted lavender, filled with books and toys and photos of the little girl who transformed their family. I'm sorry, Catherine had told Layla during one handoff, for raising him to be who he became, for not seeing sooner. You can't control your adult children's choices. No, but I can try to be better for my granddaughter. And she was. Richard was different, more distant, but present. He'd established a trust fund for Nova, set aside money for her education, made it clear she was a Vanderbilt heir regardless of her last name. But he'd also kept his word about supporting Layla, treated her with respect, never overstepped. The unlikely alliance had worked, and Layla had emerged not just surviving, but thriving. Do you think Layla made the right choice establishing custody this way, or should she have pushed for Mason to have no access at all? How would you have handled it? 1 year after the Christmas dinner that changed everything, Layla returned to the Vanderbilt estate for another holiday gathering. This time, she wasn't nervous. Nova walked beside her, holding her mother's hand, wearing a velvet dress and light-up shoes she'd insisted on. She was 3.5 now, talking in full sentences, had opinions about everything. Grandma Catherine makes good cookies, Nova announced as they approached the door. Yes, she does. Grandpa Richard teaches chess, but is boring. Layla stifled a laugh. That's not nice, but true. The door opened. Catherine swept Nova into a hug, showering her with kisses while Nova giggled. My favorite girl, I've missed you. Missed you too, Grandma. The party was smaller this year, just family. Mason was there with, surprisingly, no date. He'd stopped the revolving door of girlfriends. Layla suspected none of them wanted to date a man with a complicated custody situation and an ex-wife who was richer than him. He smiled when he saw Nova. Genuine, warm. Hey, princess. Dada! Nova ran to him, arms up. He scooped her up, kissed her forehead. How's my girl? They'd reached a place of, not friendship, but peaceful co-parenting. Mason had done therapy, court-mandated at first, but he'd continued. Had worked on his issues, was learning to be present for his daughter without trying to control everything. He'd never apologize adequately for what he did to Layla. Some things were too broken to fix. But he was trying to be a decent father, and that was enough for Nova. Layla watched them interact, Mason showing Nova the Christmas tree, Nova chattering about preschool, and felt an unexpected emotion. Gratitude. Not for the pain, not for the betrayal, but for the journey it forced her on, the woman it made her become. He's better with her than I expected, Richard said, appearing beside Layla with champagne. He's learning. And you? How are you? Good, really good. The business? Expanding into Europe next quarter. Impressive, he paused. You've handled all of this with remarkable grace. I didn't have a choice. We always have a choice. You chose strength. That matters. Catherine brought cookies. Derek and his wife brought their new baby for Nova to coo over. The family gathered around the tree for photos. And for the first time, Layla was in those photos. Not as Mason's ex-wife, as Nova's mother. As part of this complicated, imperfect family. Mason caught her eye across the room, raised his glass slightly. She nodded back. They'd destroyed each other once, but they'd rebuilt something functional from the ruins. Not for themselves, for the little girl laughing at Grandpa Richard's terrible chess jokes. That night, driving home with a sleepy Nova in the back seat, Layla's phone buzzed. A text from Mason. Thank you for everything, for her. She didn't respond, but she saved the message because some acknowledgments, even late, mattered. Here's what Layla Kingston's story teaches us about strength, motherhood, and rising from the ashes. Revenge isn't always about destruction. Sometimes it's about becoming so completely yourself that your betrayer's opinion becomes irrelevant. Mason tried to break Layla, told her she was nothing without him, used his power to isolate and diminish her, treated her like she was disposable. And for a while, she believed him. But here's the truth about people who try to make you feel small. They're terrified of your potential. They see your light and try to dim it because it threatens their fragile ego. Layla could have let that break her, could have stayed in New York, accepted being the villain in Mason's story, shrunk into nothing. Instead, she disappeared and rebuilt, created a life and a business that had nothing to do with him, raised a daughter who would never doubt her worth the way Layla once did. When she walked back into that Christmas dinner, she wasn't seeking revenge. She was reclaiming space, refusing to hide anymore. The secret baby reveal wasn't cruelty. It was truth. Nova existed, deserved to know her family, and Layla deserved to stop carrying the secret alone. Could she have handled it differently? Maybe. Could she have told Mason 3 years earlier? Possibly. But nobody gets to judge survival except the person doing the surviving. Layla made the choices that protected her daughter and herself. That's not wrong. That's mother's intuition at its finest. 3 years later, she's not defined by Mason's betrayal. She's defined by what she built afterward. By the business, the parenting, the grace with which she navigated an impossible situation. Mason learned a hard lesson. Women you discard don't disappear. Sometimes they evolve into something you can't touch, can't control, can't diminish. And sometimes they carry your legacy forward, whether you deserve it or not. That's not revenge. That's karma. That's life teaching a lesson the hard way. Choose your partners carefully. Treat people with respect. Because the woman you throw away might be the one raising your daughter to be everything you're not. Strong, independent, unbreakable. If this story resonated, if you believe in women who rebuild, in mothers who protect fiercely, in karma served cold at Christmas dinner, smash that subscribe button. Drop a comment about your own survival story. And hit like if you think Layla handled this with perfect grace. See you in the next one. Until then, remember, the best revenge is becoming so extraordinary that your betrayer becomes irrelevant to your success story.